Welcome to the GLP-1 Hub podcast. My name is Anna Reisdorf. I am a registered dietitian and GLP-1 user, and I am so excited about today's episode because we are talking to Dr. Raja Sivamani. He is a dermatologist and is going to talk all about the effects of GLP-1 on your skin. We are going to bust the myth about Ozempic face. If you've heard that people can tell you're on Ozempic or GLP-1 because of how your face looks. We're going to talk about that today. It's super exciting to talk about how GLP-1 impacts your skin. So I can't wait to share this episode with you. But we have a new sponsor for the podcast, and this is a brand that I personally absolutely love. I tried it a few years ago and was blown away by their low net carb Hawaiian rolls. Yes, Hawaiian rolls. So if you're looking for a healthier bread option, I want to introduce you to Hero Bread. They make everyday favorites of different kinds of bread that are packed with fiber. They're low in net carbs and have 0 grams of sugar. Plus they have more protein than the popular bread options out there with up to 10 grams a serving for bread. So Hero Bread offers a wide variety of products, including sliced loaves, buns, tortillas, rolls, bagels. They even have some very special drops of indulgent treats like the Hero Croissant, which has just 2 grams of net carbs for a croissant and 10 grams of protein per serving. Y'all, they sent me this and it changed my life. They were delicious with 10 grams of protein for you to eat a croissant. And they also have cheddar biscuits with only 1 gram of net carbs. The Hero Croissant has a 22,000 person wait list, but you can get it anytime through a subscription on hero.co. Their website is hero.co, not .com. So you want to go to .co. So the products are not just delicious, they're great for everyday meals. You can use them for a breakfast sandwich, burgers, wrap. Their wraps are great too. And they really won't be able to tell that it's better for you bread products. So Hero helps you get more fiber, essential for those of us on GLP-1, cut down on sugar, and add more protein to your diet. And so you're just gonna love it and still eat bread and croissants. So they're offering a great deal for our users, 10% off your first order to try the Hero Bread. Just go over to hero.co and use the code GLP1 Hub. That's GLP, the number 1 Hub at checkout. So GLP1 Hub at checkout at hero.co to get 10% off your first order. And thank you so much, Hero, for sponsoring this podcast episode. Let's get to it. Hello, welcome to the GLP-1 Hub podcast. The topic today is something I've been so excited about. It was on my mind when I started this podcast, and that is GLP-1 and skin health. So I want to welcome Dr. Raja Sivamani to the podcast today. And please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your work.
Anna, it's a real pleasure to be here with you. And this is an area that's been growing so much. So I am a board certified dermatologist. I also am an Ayurvedic practitioner. I was an engineer before I went to medical school. Wow. So I've been thinking about a lot of the different sort of ways that we can either improve the body or ways that maybe the body responds to different treatments and how we can address that. So a lot of my work now, I see patients clinically. We also have an aesthetic clinic apart from my medical surgical clinic, but we do a lot of clinical trials. And my clinical trials, although heavily focused in dermatology, I will tell you we've now crossed over into trying to understand a lot around how nutrition affects the skin. I mean, we've published on whole foods and how they affect different aspects of the skin. The microbiome is an area that we think has been just fascinating over the past decade. And then really looking at longevity. And longevity doesn't mean just looking at how your skin looks. It's really how the internal parts look, looking at epigenetic changes, how are better ways that we can treat ourselves holistically. In a way, I think I've moved from being, I'm an integrative dermatologist, but I've kind of moved into the space of integrative medicine. Just a little personal note, my father had diabetes. And it really hit him pretty hard. And back then, we really didn't understand it. And I was determined to figure out how can we get better with our metabolic health. So there's not a lot of us around there that are dermatologists looking at beyond the skin. necessarily in this sort of a way. I think a lot of
Hmm.
us want to think beyond the skin, but I'm really trying to also focus on how can we be metabolically more healthy and how can we really affect longevity measures? Because it turns out if you're healthier and you're globally healthier, your skin is more healthy too. So it's all
Sure.
tied together.
Sure. So how does being metabolically unhealthy affect your skin, like more specifically? Does it make you have more wrinkles? Does it make you look dull? Like what kind of signs would you see?
Yeah, so when you look at metabolic health, a big driver on that is insulin resistance.
Hmm.
And when we think about insulin resistance, it's not just, oh, you ate too many carbs. I mean, that's obviously, habit that can lead to more insulin resistance. But what we're learning now is that, you have three areas of fat that can deposit. You can have subcutaneous fat. You can get visceral fat, but what the area that we forget about frequently is intracellular fat. And this is a big one when you look at the liver, when you have intrahepatic fat, that actually leads to more insulin resistance. And so then that starts to drive your fasting insulin up. And if you don't specifically check for these things, you can miss them. Now, what's the problem with having insulin really high? Well, you can't lose any fat if you're trying to, because insulin isn't just about lowering blood glucose. You can actually shift more of your homeostasis so that you're building more fat. Secondly, it leads to more aging too, because the
Hmm.
more insulin resistant you are, you're not as good at bringing down your glucose. And what happens when you have too much glucose circulating? Well, you get these things known as advanced glycation endpoints, and
Hmm.
that leads to more aging in the skin, more aging probably throughout the entire body. And then on top of it, if you have really high insulin, oh my gosh, and I'll tell you, there are a lot of conditions that are driven insane by the presence of too much insulin, such as acne. Now we're really worried about things like hidradenitis suppurativa. I don't want to get into all the weeds unless we want to, but the point is that if you're not metabolically healthy, not only do you have cardiovascular risk, and not only do you have this metabolic risk with diabetes and whatnot, but your skin starts to shift too. And we see
Hmm.
it in a lot of our patients. As they become healthier globally, they start to become healthier even on their on.
That's great. So where do the GLP-1s fit in with that whole picture? Because obviously, I'm a dietitian. I'd prefer if people, did it in a way of changing their diet and the exercise and all of that. But in your practice, like how do you see the GLP-1s working as part of that to improve those parameters?
Yeah, this is an area that I think becomes a common misconception because we say, gosh, if someone just fixes their diet, then that's it, right? And you as a dietitian know you can give people all the best advice in the world. And we see this too. Like if you did certain habits in life, then you might not develop metabolic diseases as much. But we're also human. We
Hmm.
also have complex psychology. Sometimes we deal with things that we struggle with in life and we cope with many different ways, whether it's lack of sleep, we struggle with insomnia and that leads to different sort of hormonal imbalances and you end up, putting on a little extra pounds that you didn't want to. Or yes, we know we're not supposed to eat this, but sometimes, our tongues and our, as we say, our dopamine hits lead us to maybe making certain food choices. So why this area of medicine has just been revolutionary is because now we have a pharmacological agent that can GLP-1s aren't just limited to GLP-1s. They're GLP-1 agonists, but now there are GLP-1 GIP dual agonists, which
Hmm.
seem to work even better. And let's see how this space evolves because I think there are companies now thinking about orals that are waiting on the wings and not just injectables. So it's going to be a whole revolution. Already is. So why is this important? Well, it turns out that if you have GLP-1 in your body circulating, that actually helps you feel more satisfied. You don't feel hunger as much. And so it gives you that little better edge, not only to help control what is coming in terms of food, because you just don't feel hungry as much. So you can start to calorically restrict. It also improves your insulin sensitivity. And there's a
Hmm.
whole host of other factors that it helps with. Now, there are always side effects with these medications that you have to watch for. But now you finally have a way to calorically restrict without having the pangs of hunger kind of rip at your innards, and which is a big deal.
Yes.
And so I think for us that might minimize that and say, oh, you just have to control it. Human psychology is bigger than, oh, you just have to. There's a lot more that gets involved. And so I think, now we have an opportunity to really leverage the fact that we have safe, effective medications that can help you get to your goals. And so
Hmm.
I think because of that, this has just been huge.
Good. So is your hope that with people using this medication that will impact how they look and their appearance and all of that? I mean, obviously they're metabolically healthier. So do you expect that to reflect on their skin long term as well?
Yeah, so my opinion on these medications
Hmm.
has not been so skin focused, to be honest with you. I think I've
Okay.
been more focused on internal longevity and looking at, can we get people more metabolically healthy? And what I think is really cool is when I talk to people about diet, now I can actually help them adjust their diet and create new habits. And to me, that's the most exciting part of this. So when I talk people through, caloric restriction or thinking about how do we want to shift the diet, this has been an awesome way of getting things jump started for them. In terms of their skin getting better, now, if you have inflammatory diseases, we're getting early signals now that especially if you're in the overweight category, I don't want to say this across the board, but if you're in the
Hmm.
overweight category with some sort of other metabolic issues, or you're in the obese category, and these are all based on BMIs. We're not trying to, fat shame anyone or anything like that. These are medical diagnoses on different targets like overweight and obesity. If you bring that down, we know that there are some inflammatory diseases that actually improve. So not only does your skin get better necessarily in your face, but just globally. One of the side effects, though, of going on such a medication that can lead to loss is that the loss isn't all fat. In fact, the
Hmm.
studies have shown that 70% is fat, but you still lose muscle. That's why it's so important to have a high protein diet and make sure that you're doing weight training and exercising those muscles so that you don't lose the muscle weight, and connective tissue. And here's the kicker, Anna. Connective tissue is things like collagen, elastin, hyaluronic acid. And we don't routinely, I don't know if you do, but we don't routinely lift things with our face, right? So
What?
the problem is you're not always stimulating your face. And so you can lose some of that volume on your face. And so ironically, you might actually, in some cases, start to look more aged. You sometimes see
Hmm.
this even with extreme bodybuilders that have a very low body fat percentage. You can see that their skin sometimes will start to hang off their face because you don't have the natural fat that's there to kind of give you that youthful appearance. My driver on this is not always like a visual look on the face, but it's more, hey, globally, we have an opportunity to do something that is really, really important for your health. And people sometimes do actually look younger. Absolutely.
Hmm.
But if you lose substantial amounts of weight, you're talking about those folks that are losing 20, 25%, maybe in 15 to 20%. You might see effects on your face that start to make you look a little bit more aged if you don't have any other solutions in place.
So, I don't know who started the term Ozempic face, and that I think I read an article in the New York Times. That was the first place I saw
Yeah.
that term, and how you can tell if someone is on Ozempic based on their face. Do you think that there's any truth to that?
Well, I think that's a little bit of an overcall because there are a lot of people that can lose weight for a variety of reasons. I mean, if people get like a bariatric surgery, a lot of them will lose substantial amounts of weight. Or some people actually do shift their diet, and some people are able to do it and then they lose substantial amounts of weight. So I think Ozempic face is just an acknowledgement. And by the way, Ozempic isn't the only medication that's out there. I mean,
Sure.
again, that's a GLP-1 specific. We have other medications out there like Zepbound, Ozempic's corollary for weight loss is Wegovy. I mean, there's a lot of things that are now emerging, but probably because it was the one that got really popularized. But I
Hmm.
think it's an acknowledgement that when you lose a lot of weight, your body doesn't choose to lose it from everywhere else besides the face. You lose it on the face too. And so because of that, you will get volume loss on the face as well. And so because of that, there is this facial changes that occur where you're losing facial volume. You're also losing that, remember, the collagen and elastin from your skin. So you're also losing some elasticity in the skin that's going to also occur. And then you might start to get a tiny bit of crepiness that starts to build up because you don't have that volume support. So all of those things isn't specific to this medication. Anyone that
Sure.
loses a substantial amount of weight can do that. So you can't just look at someone and be like, oh, you're on this. It's kind of like harkening back to the days when people had rosacea and people would be like, yep, you're an alcoholic. It turns out, no, it doesn't work quite that way. Sometimes it's just, you've had a lifetime of sun exposure and some people just, get redness on their face. So I think it's good clickbait if you say,
Hmm.
we can look at your face and tell you're on it, but that's just not true. I mean,
Well,
there's many different reasons you could have
I
that.
had a reporter reach out to me and she sent me a bunch of pictures of celebrities and she's like, which ones are on Ozempic? And I was like, How am I supposed to know that? Unless they
You know, a
say it.
lot of people will microdose now, Anna. And so they're not losing a substantial amount of weight when they do the microdosing. And, especially during a lot of these shortages when compounding pharmacies were helping people get access. I mean, now that's kind of lifted away, so we don't go to it as much. But I used to microdose with patients. And when you microdose, some patients lose substantial amount of weight, but some don't. They're just trying to optimize a bit of their weight loss from maybe like the overweight category down to something a little bit, not like a huge change, but maybe they're trying to just get like a 5% change or something like that.
Hmm.
In those cases, you can't tell if they're
Right.
on one of these medications. So I think that, anyway, it's kind of like our voyeurism, wishful thinking, but it doesn't work that way.
Yes, definitely. So you've been involved with the development of a product that maybe could help counteract some of these effects of the medication. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Image Skincare is a company that I've been doing some consulting with. I love that they're very evidence-based and they really focus on science first. So one of the things that they've developed is really looking at, first of all, understanding that, hey, when we lose weight, you lose it over the entire body. And
Hmm.
you can get these facial changes that we just talked about. So are there ways that we can try to counteract that? Now, 100% reversing it, that's hard, right? But even if we can do a little bit of a boost to try to say, let's try to prevent the face from going through so many changes. So what they've done is they've come up with this product called Lift. It's
Hmm.
basically the combination of multiple ingredients in there. And these ingredients affect the epidermis, which is, the what we call the skin barrier stratum corneum, and the epidermis. It basically hits all the levels of the skin, but I just want to walk through that. In the epidermis, it helps to create a better skin barrier so you can retain more moisture in the skin. That's really important because that plumps the skin up too.
Hmm.
And then the second part is, can you build better connections? Can you at least help? They're using ingredients that can help with theoretically improving collagen quality and the density. And then also some that might be able to, at least in cell culture studies, when you're looking at what we call adipocytes, like fat cells, they can actually stimulate some of the fat to start producing more. Because one of the key things that we don't want to have is if you're losing all this volume on the face, how do you bring it back? And the way we bring it back is either you can use devices or you can add fillers or whatnot, or you can use these ingredients that may trigger some of this to come back. And so that's the principle behind it, is using a good mix of ingredients that can address different layers of the skin to try to improve the visual appearance and also the internal volume of the skin.
So is it for your face only, or could it be for your whole body? Because I know a lot of people have significant loose skin once they lose weight.
Right. I think at this stage, the way they're approaching it is for the face because that's the one that is striking for everyone. But there's
Sure.
nothing that says you can't use it on different parts of your body. But
Hmm.
the studies that we're doing right now, and we're engaged in clinical studies, has been focused on the face and the neck. So that's where
Okay.
we're looking at right now.
Sure. So, and for those people who are having skin issues in other parts of their body, loose skin, is there anything that could help them there, kind of maybe reduce some of that? I know it's related to genetics and age and a lot of different factors.
Yeah, if you're looking at the rest of the body, I mean, let's go through where people really hate it. And by the way, this isn't something new to GLP-1, GIP medications being present. I've had a lot of patients complain about crepiness. This is a huge area that people don't like. Crepiness on their arms, and
Hmm.
sometimes they lose volume on their buttocks, and then on their legs, they're starting to thin out. Part of that is we have muscle loss that happens over time. We don't have to be prisoners of the march of time. I mean, we are all on that journey, but
Sure.
people can at least do a little bit of muscle preserving exercises. Weight training doesn't mean you have to be a gym bro, so to speak. You can also do like body weight exercises. There's a lot of things like Pilates and other things like yoga, power yoga even, that can help you do static muscle contractions and whatnot to build the muscle up. But I would say when you look at people over time, they lose volume because they lose muscle. Their natural subcutaneous fat over time. And sometimes, yes, you gain extra subcutaneous fat in certain areas, but sometimes like areas like the arms and the legs, you actually end up losing it, especially with sun exposure. And then you also have sun damage that comes with time that thins the skin out and you lose that collagen. And then as aging progresses, some hormones shift. and you don't have
Hmm.
as many hormones, especially in women that go through menopause. You don't have as much of the circulating estrogen, which usually helps to support the skin to be a bit more youthful. So then you see some changes there. And even men, they can lose testosterone with time. And so then you start to lose the natural plumpness to the skin. So I see a lot of people getting concerned with their arms getting thinner, their legs getting thinner. And yes, these sort of solutions that are coming to the market, hopefully we'll have studies that look at that on the arms and the legs and the buttock areas too.
Hmm.
And so,
Right.
now I will say as a side point, there are devices that can be helpful with this as well. So if
Okay.
you look at things like fractionated lasers, like there's a Fraxel or things that can stimulate collagen, you can sometimes do that in other body parts and like focal areas where if you're getting a lot of thinning, you might be able to at least thicken the skin a little bit, like the back of the hands. I know a lot of people hate that because it makes them look a bit more aged.
Sure.
And then people will inject things like fillers and whatnot to plump the skin up too. I mean, you can't be doing that over the entire arm, but people will do that a lot on their hands as well. So, people are looking at other options
Hmm.
beyond just, some of these topicals. There are other devices and whatnot. Now, one thing I will say though, Anna, you can't just eat your way to, plumper skin necessarily. I mean,
Okay.
people need to maintain collagen, but you have to be good with your sunscreen. You have to be good with your sun protection. There's so many factors that are involved in here that we could probably do another whole podcast on how do you keep the skin as healthy as possible.
Sure.
But anyway, I think going back to your point, yes, other parts of the body are going to be important, and I'm sure solutions will emerge as we go along.
So some of these devices that you mentioned, are these things that one would go to a dermatologist for? Can you buy it for you to use yourself? Like I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, some of these you'll have to go to I would say a trained professional. I mean, some of
Hmm.
these it depends from place to place. And I would say you want to go to someone that really knows laser technology really well. And so dermatologists are trained in that area. A lot of plastic surgeons will be trained in that area as well.
Hmm.
But I will say the most training is typically the dermatologist, just because we use a lot of these in the clinic over time. And a lot of us have gotten at least one or two of these in our clinic. And we've been doing treatments, facial aesthetics for a long time. And just repurposing it for, you say, the hands or the arms. I mean, a lot of us do that.
Okay. And you've mentioned collagen a couple of times.
Right.
So collagen, naturally declines over time,
Right.
but there are a lot of people who use collagen products, myself included.
Right.
Easy put in my coffee. So what are your thoughts on like taking collagen to try to counteract some of this?
So there's a couple approaches to this because collagen, the theory behind it is you're delivering the amino acids that were
Hmm.
important for collagen. So if you take the collagen, theoretically, you take it, your body breaks it down to the amino acids that you need, and it sends it exactly where you need it. Now, it's not quite that way. The way it works is if you do take collagen, it has to be the ones that have already been pre-broken down into the
Hmm.
oligopeptides. If they're like full collagen, your body doesn't break them down that efficiently. And so then a lot of it just comes out the other end. You don't necessarily absorb it. Now, if you do get the pre-processed oligopeptides and then you take that and you take it in, your body will be able to take them and then break them apart into the amino acids, but they won't necessarily send it to only the face or only the arms. They'll send it all over. And the idea being, and it's best if you combine it with something that's also going to stimulate collagen. So for example, when we do facial resurfacing, I will get people to take supplements. And I'll tell you, I do protein supplements. I don't do collagen supplements. So I'll come
Hmm.
back to why I do that.
Sure.
But if you're going to take collagen supplements, something else to stimulate the collagen to start forming is important, because then your body will know that, hey, there's more that needs it over here. And while it's circulating in your bloodstream, that part of your body will take it up at a faster rate. It's not that it hones there, but they're just hungrier for those amino acids because they've got the stimulus to say, hey, I need to go use it. Now, the studies, although they're early, seem to show that at least it can improve the appearance of fine lines on the
Hmm.
face. But, we're in early days with collagen supplements. There's marine collagen, and then there's non-marine collagen sources. I don't think anyone's done a head-to-head. They're also, for a lot of the people that are vegetarian, vegan, or have religious restrictions, there are other non-collagen sources that can stimulate collagen. And
Hmm.
so people can look for that too, and they're out there. Now, let me get to protein. When you
Sure.
look at protein, you're going to get a full plate of amino acids. A lot of these protein supplements, especially the isolates, will end up giving you a lot of the amino acids that you need. But here's the kicker. A lot of people will take whey protein. as the
Hmm.
protein supplement. All of them have the full plate of essential amino acids. Typically, when you go to a protein supplement, some are a little bit better than others. But we've actually looked at this, Anna. We've actually sourced the protein from different places and looked at what is it that their makeup is and how do they differ from each other. And it turns out the highest quality protein, and we've submitted this for publication, by the way, the highest quality proteins that are out there are either pea or
Hmm.
soy or egg white, because
Okay.
we see that they seem to be much more even, and they have the ones that tend to be used for collagen synthesis a little bit better. The lowest quality protein will be very mind opening, I think. The lowest quality protein that we saw were things like beef was super like low compared to others across the board, and
Hmm.
hemp. And so, if you're thinking about using high quality protein supplements, then you want to go towards something like, again, pea, soy, or move towards egg white rather than whey. And the other thing, because I know that, a lot of your listeners are going to be very educated, so I'm just going to kind of hit this preemptively. One of the things with plant-based sourced protein is there's a worry about heavy metals
Yes.
sometimes getting into them. And so you just have to find those right companies that are doing that sort of sourcing and testing. But there's some very high quality sources for pea and soy that are out there as well. It tends to sometimes be some of the other protein sources, but yeah, pea, soy, and then pumpkin seeds, another one if you're really trying to boost hair health, because pumpkin seeds naturally have this ability to support hair.
Hmm.
Some of the pumpkin seed oil studies that have emerged. So that's another one that I actually talk to people about if they are thinking about
Is
hair.
pumpkin made into protein powder? I don't think I've seen that.
Yes, now pumpkin seed is now made into protein powder. It's a new
Oh,
thing
cool.
that's emerged. It
Dang,
turns
learning.
out pumpkin seed oil has something called betas. They have these plant-based beta sterols in there
Hmm.
that help to block the testosterone to dihydrotestosterone conversion, which sometimes can contribute to hair thinning. I
Okay.
know that the reason I bring this up is tying it back to even GLP-1s. If we're using GLP-1, GIP dual agonists, one of the things people can become is protein deficient. So you want to find a high quality protein source. And if you're not careful, sometimes your hair can thin too.
Yes. So I
And
was going to
so
ask you that.
you have to be careful
What's
about supporting that.
what can we do besides protein to get our hair to stay on our
Oh
heads?
gosh. So now what happens is then you might want to visit your local dermatologist, because we have some off-label uses for pharmaceuticals that we can sometimes give people. Now you can do topical minoxidil. There are
Hmm.
oral minoxidil approaches that a lot of us will do in an off-label way. So it's not an FDA approved indication, but so go talk to your local dermatologist. That's what I would say, and they can discuss other options for you as well.
Okay. Yeah, because it's like you're like, oh, I look so good now, but now my hair fell out. It's I mean,
Some of that is just an indication that you have to keep up with your protein intake. But
sure.
gosh, you must really emphasize this as a dietitian, but you really got to keep up with that protein intake. Make sure it's high quality protein. One of the things a lot of people will say is just go to carnivore diet. I'm just going to come out and say, if you do that, you're going to get a lot of saturated fats if you eat any and all meats. So
Hmm.
you have to focus on leaner meats, or go to the plant-based high quality proteins like tofu. Sometimes people say, oh, they have carbs that come with them, but they're complex carbs. Not all carbs are equal. So you have to be careful. And the other thing, when they've looked at what drives fatty liver, because again, that's what drives a lot of insulin resistance, saturated fats are in there. They can
Hmm.
drive a little bit of fatty liver. So if you go to a pure carnivore diet, yes, you will metabolically seem to get healthy, but then you'll plateau. And so I think it's really important to just make sure your meats are high quality, meaning low fat, lean. I think that that's
Right.
really important.
Well, the other thing is in carnivore, there's not much fiber, and GLP-1 causes constipation.
Yes. Oh
And then
my
if you don't
gosh.
have any fiber,
Oh,
then you're
so very
like,
true. Oh,
why?
that you bring up a really, really important point. Now, there are some side effects when you take these medications, and I just want to mention what some of them are.
Sure.
First of all, a lot of GI side effects, because you don't get as quick what we say gastric emptying. Your stomach doesn't release the contents as quickly. So you can get GERD, which is esophageal reflux, which can
Hmm.
be an issue if you already struggle with that. Constipation. You can get GI distress. Sometimes you can get a little bit more bloating and a little bit more gas because the food isn't moving as quickly through. And then nausea, just because you're not emptying things out. And if you're eating very heavy diets, then you might start to get very nauseous too. So Anna, you're 100%. I love that you're talking about fiber, because that's our natural way of keeping things moving along.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's something that we need. I'm always like protein fiber. I feel like people are going to get tired of me Just saying that over and over and over again. Anyway, one last question for you. What do you see as the future for GLP-1s? There's so much exciting stuff going on, so much research. You got your hand in it a little bit more than I do. So what do you see the future?
Well, right now we have a lot of injectables that work really well. I think what you're going to see is emergence of oral options for people that hate needles. Also, I think people are going to really, I hope our education and the stuff that you're doing here on this podcast is awesome. I hope people start to realize that the medication on its own isn't sufficient to have a healthier life. But I hope it stimulates people to then start more holistically thinking about themselves as, hey, wait a minute, maybe there are better ways that I can eat. Maybe there's better ways that I can move. And maybe there are better choices that I can now make around some of these things in life that can really help them be healthier. Now, will it lead to better sleep? Yes, actually, some of these GLP-1, for example, Zepbound, does have an FDA approval for obstructive sleep apnea. So there are certain groups of people where getting this weight down may actually help them sleep better too. So gosh, think about what that means. Better productivity, better concentration. And also, I mean, sleep is so important to repair. So does that mean that you're going to holistically be a little bit healthier? And then maybe better relationships because you're not waking up your partner all the time. You're in a partnership that, single people can be happy too. So I'm not making any comments there, but I'm just saying that, I think there are some other things that'll come around just the ecosystem of being healthier that I'm hoping this will start to move forward. And then longevity really becomes a conversation now. I've been so excited about the fact that we can actually talk much more truly about longevity because we're impacting so many other factors of health.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, good. I really appreciate this conversation. You answered a lot of my questions.
Oh,
And
great.
so,
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. And it was a lot of fun.
good. Thank you so much once again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being here and listening to the episode of the GLP-1 Hub podcast with Dr. Sivamani. I hope you learned so much. I know that I did. And I want to share some exciting news about things we're working on at GLP-1 Hub. We've got 2 new 7-day meal plans totally free for you. One is a plant-based meal plan for those of you that don't eat meat, and one is a more omnivore meal plan. They all have at least 100 grams of protein and around 1,500, 1,700 calories, so you can get an idea of what to eat. We're also going to be sharing out some new recipe books for different ideas for breakfast, lunches, dinners, so you know exactly you're getting your nutrition in and you're getting healthier on GLP-1, not just losing weight. And then I want to thank our sponsor, Hero Bread. So you can get 10% off at hero.co with the code GLP1. So that's the number 1 Hub. When you put it in there at checkout, you'll get 10% off of Hero. And thank you, Hero, so much for sponsoring this podcast. And I'll see you guys next week.